Para muchos de nosotros, la búsqueda de la abundancia se siente como un sprint perpetuo contra el reloj. Se nos enseña, desde los primeros momentos de ambición, que la riqueza y la claridad se forjan únicamente en el calor implacable del esfuerzo diurno. El éxito exige vigilancia, acción y la negativa a hacer una pausa. Sin embargo, esta noche viajamos a un concepto tan ancestral, tan fundamentalmente contraintuitivo, que suena a pura fantasía. La noción de que tu mayor prosperidad podría estar acumulándose en las horas en las que menos consciente estás, cuando el mundo se desvanece en sombras y el silencio reina supremo. Imaginemos, si os parece bien, un lugar conocido simplemente como Aetelburg, una ciudad enclavada profundamente en los valles olvidados del viejo mundo. Ethelberg era, a todas luces, un enigma. Sus murallas eran robustas, sus ciudadanos estaban contentos y sus mercados rebosaban especias, sedas y monedas acuñadas con la plata más pura. Los viajeros hablaban de su extraña facilidad. Sus residentes nunca estaban apurados, nunca frenéticos, y los libros de contabilidad de la ciudad, revisados mensualmente, mostraban sistemáticamente ganancias que desafiaban la matemática del comercio humano. El misterio se arraigaba en la oscuridad. Cada tarde, justo cuando las largas sombras se extendían por la plaza central, Aetelburg implementaba un ritual conocido como la Gran Calma. Los pesados portones de roble se atrancaban, los puestos de mercado se cubrían meticulosamente, y cada comerciante, artesano y jornalero se retiraba a sus hogares. La ciudad se quedaba completamente en silencio. Ni un martillo golpeaba, ni un telar sonaba, ni una rueda de carro giraba hasta que el sol coronaba la cresta oriental a la mañana siguiente. Era una pausa obligatoria e innegociable. Cualquier economista o historiador pragmático predeciría el estancamiento, quizás el declive, bajo tales restricciones. Sin embargo, Aetelburg se hacía más rica, año tras año. Los tenderos, al descorrer sus puertas al amanecer, con frecuencia encontraban su inventario ligeramente aumentado. El barril de harina del panadero parecía más lleno. El orfebre juraba que la pila de moneda recién acuñada era marginalmente más alta de lo que la había dejado. El consenso entre los ancianos era que la ciudad ganaba su verdadero y silencioso impulso no con el sudor del día, sino con la rendición de la noche. ¿Cómo podía el mero sueño traducirse en riqueza tangible y creciente? ¿Era esto el resultado de alguna bendición arcana, un pacto olvidado con un espíritu benévolo de la tierra, o simplemente los susurros exagerados de mentes supersticiosas? Los sabios de la ciudad ofrecían explicaciones crípticas, sugiriendo que la verdadera riqueza no se creaba por el esfuerzo, sino por el espacio que el esfuerzo permitía. Afirmaban que cuando la interferencia humana cesaba, los ritmos naturales del universo, la tranquila orquestación de la oportunidad y la fortuna, podían finalmente tomar el control y organizarse para el beneficio de la ciudad. Esta noche, mientras el mundo exterior comienza su propia desaceleración nocturna, vamos a pasear por esas calles silenciosas de Aetelburg. Nos detendremos junto a las contraventanas cerradas y escucharemos los sonidos suaves, casi imperceptibles, de la prosperidad pasiva que se teje en el tejido de la ciudad dormida. Este viaje no es meramente sobre historia o leyenda, es una metáfora profunda para la arquitectura de vuestro propio éxito. Si sois alguien que se siente obligado a presionar constantemente, a mantener activo cada canal de su mente, esta narrativa os pedirá suavemente que consideréis la mecánica invisible del descanso. Exploraremos el concepto de que las soluciones que buscáis, los avances creativos que anheláis y la intuición necesaria para guiar vuestros próximos pasos no se encuentran forzando la cerradura, sino marchándose y dejando que el mecanismo silencioso dentro de vuestra propia conciencia alinee los cilindros. La ciudad de Aetelburg, aparentemente enriquecida por la magia pasiva, simboliza el increíble y no reconocido poder de vuestra propia mente subconsciente, un taller que solo realmente comienza su labor más fructífera una vez que el ruido de vuestro esfuerzo consciente ha sido silenciado. Akamotos, dejad que el mundo exterior disminuya, pues los secretos de cómo hacerse más rico mientras descansáis están a punto de ser compartidos, piedra por piedra tranquila, sombra por sombra suave. Prestad atención al silencio, es donde se asienta la base de esta prosperidad peculiar. Bienvenidos, una vez más, a nuestras historias de dormir. Si acabáis de llegar, cerrad los ojos y permitid que esta noche os hablemos de silencio, el gran arquitecto, el verdadero motor de la fortuna. Como os hemos contado, Aetelburg no es una ciudad que podamos localizar en ningún mapa contemporáneo, pero es un lugar que reside en la memoria profunda de la humanidad. Es la representación de un principio olvidado, que la mayor creación a menudo requiere mayor vacío. Imaginad el momento exacto. El sol se hunde tras los picos escarpados de los montes grises. El último rayo de luz baña la torre del reloj, que ya no marca el tiempo de la acción, sino el tiempo del misterio. A las 6 de la tarde, la hora exacta conocida por los ciudadanos como la hora del reposo, se escuchaban 3 campanadas lentas, profundas, reverberantes. No eran un aviso, eran una orden. El mercader Ulrico, conocido por su temperamento activo y sus ojos siempre ávidos, recogía sus lujosos tapices de seda. Su esposa, Lara, ya tenía el estofado cociéndose lentamente en el fuego, listo para ser consumido antes de que la oscuridad se hiciera total. Ulrico se resistía. Quería quedarse un rato más. Una hora extra de regateo, pensaba, podría significar una docena de monedas de plata más. Pero la ley de la gran calma no era flexible. Se decía que si alguien se atrevía a realizar un acto comercial o productivo después de las 3 campanadas, su fortuna se desvanecería tan rápidamente como el rocío matinal bajo el sol de mediodía. Ulrico cubría sus tapices, cerraba las contraventanas de madera con pestillos de hierro y se dirigía a casa, pero no sin antes realizar el ritual nocturno que todos los comerciantes debían seguir. Se agachaba y, con la palma de la mano tocando el suelo de piedra de su puesto, susurraba una frase antigua. El trabajo ha terminado. Ahora, que el orden trabaje. Y es aquí donde reside la primera gran reflexión de nuestra historia de dormir, amigos míos. ¿Alguna vez habéis sentido la urgencia de seguir presionando una idea, un proyecto, un problema, mucho después de que vuestra mente consciente se haya agotado? Asumimos que la fuerza bruta, la persistencia, es la única vía hacia el avance. Pero, ¿y si vuestra mente, al igual que los tapices de Ulrico, necesita ser cubierta, dejada en la oscuridad, para que una fuerza más profunda, el orden a que se refería, pueda entrar en acción? En Aethelburg, la prosperidad no era una cuestión de acumulación diurna, sino de organización nocturna. Los ciudadanos sabían que la mente consciente es excelente para la acción, para el cálculo, para la lógica lineal. Pero el subconsciente, liberado de la tiranía de la tarea, es el maestro de la conexión, el inventor silencioso, el que encuentra el camino más corto entre 2 puntos que el intelecto no puede ver. Recordad esta enseñanza mientras os hundís más y más en el reposo. Vuestra mente es la ciudad de Aethelburg. Cuando os forzáis a la actividad constante, la ciudad está congestionada, ruidosa, nadie puede oír los susurros de la oportunidad. Pero cuando aplicáis la gran calma, cuando os retiráis voluntariamente, los organizadores silenciosos comienzan su labor. Volvamos a la ciudad. El silencio de Aethelburg no era un silencio opresivo, era un silencio denso, cargado de potencial. Una vez que las familias cenaban y se retiraban, la ciudad se convertía en un vasto observatorio. Los ancianos, que eran los guardianes de esa tradición, nunca dormían las primeras horas de la noche. Se sentaban en sus patios traseros, bajo la luz plateada de la luna, y escuchaban. ¿Qué escuchaban? Escuchaban el roce de la fortuna. Este roce no era un sonido físico, sino una sensación. Los ancianos de Aethelburg, a través de generaciones de práctica, habían sintonizado su percepción con los cambios sutiles en el ambiente. Algunos juraban que podían oír el clic de los engranajes cósmicos ajustándose. Otros decían que era el sonido del dinero cambiando de manos, no en el sentido físico, sino en el sentido de la intención de la fortuna reorganizándose para el amanecer. Había una leyenda particular sobre un agricultor llamado Cael. Cael había pasado todo el día intentando descifrar cómo irrigar una nueva sección de su campo. Había cavado zanjas, había movido piedras, y se había frustrado. La solución requería redirigir una pequeña cascada, pero el ángulo parecía imposible. Al llegar la hora del reposo, regresó a casa refunfuñando. Esa noche, mientras dormía, tuvo un sueño vívido, no de dioses o tesoros, sino de física simple. Soñó con una piedra de forma peculiar que había ignorado durante el día. En el sueño, la piedra no era un obstáculo, sino un pivote. Al despertar, Cael no se apresuró. Siguió la ley de la ciudad. Desayunó, esperó el amanecer y solo entonces regresó al campo. Allí encontró la piedra. No la quitó, sino que la usó para desviar el flujo exactamente en el ángulo correcto. La solución había llegado en su ausencia, organizada por el silencio. Aquí tenemos el segundo gran pilar de la sabiduría de Aethelburg, La prosperidad requiere la rendición a la intuición, y la intuición solo puede hablar cuando la lógica consciente ha enmudecido. ¿Con qué frecuencia ignoramos esa voz suave, esa solución inesperada que surge al despertarnos, porque estamos demasiado ocupados volviendo a presionar el problema con la misma fuerza que falló el día anterior? Pensad en esto. Si vuestra mente es un complejo mecanismo de relojería, las horas de vigilia son el tiempo en que las piezas están en constante fricción y movimiento, generando calor y ruido. Las horas de la gran calma son cuando las piezas se lubrican, se limpian y se reajustan por sí solas. Para aquellos de vosotros que buscáis claridad en la vida o una nueva perspectiva, permitid que Aetelburg os recuerde que no se trata de trabajar más duro, sino de permitir que el trabajo se haga solo. Ahora, mientras la luna sigue su curso sobre las tejas de arcilla de la ciudad, nos adentraremos en el aspecto más fascinante y menos comprendido de esta riqueza nocturna, los almacenes de la multiplicación. Cada comerciante en Aetelburg tenía un almacén, generalmente en el sótano, donde guardaba su inventario más valioso. Estos almacenes eran oscuros, frescos y, sobre todo, dejados completamente en paz durante la noche. Se sabía que las mercaderías no se multiplicaban físicamente, como por arte de magia, pero sí se reorganizaban de maneras que maximizaban su valor. Tomemos el ejemplo de la tejedora Lyra. Ella tejía complejos patrones de lana, pero a veces, al terminar un rollo de tela, no sabía exactamente a qué tipo de cliente iría destinada. ¿Sería para los nobles, para los comerciantes viajeros, o para un uso local? Dejaba el rollo de tela cubierto en su almacén. Por la mañana, al retirar el paño que lo cubría, encontraba algo peculiar. El color de la tela, a la luz del amanecer, parecía más vibrante, o los pliegues se habían asentado de tal manera que el patrón parecía más complejo y deseable. Lo que sucedía, según los ancianos, era que el universo, a través del silencio de la noche, había ajustado la percepción. No había más lana, pero la idea de la lana se había enriquecido. Durante el día, Lyra estaba saturada de los detalles técnicos de tejer. Su mente estaba fijada en los hilos, las tensiones. De noche, su mente subconsciente, libre, había procesado sutilmente la demanda del mercado y la estética. Al despertar, Lyra miraba la tela con ojos frescos, a veces comprendiendo intuitivamente que si cortaba la tela de cierta manera, o si la ofrecía a un mercader específico, su valor se triplicaría. La riqueza nocturna no era material, sino de conexión. La ciudad se hacía rica porque, en el reposo, los ciudadanos encontraban las conexiones invisibles entre la oferta y la demanda, entre el esfuerzo y el resultado óptimo. Es hora de nuestra siguiente pregunta, para que la llevéis con vosotros en vuestro viaje hacia el sueño. ¿De qué manera vuestra propia ciudad interior, vuestra mente, se está enriqueciendo cada noche mientras la saturáis o la ignoráis con el ruido de las preocupaciones diarias? ¿Qué ideas brillantes o soluciones sencillas se están formando en la oscuridad que nunca llegáis a ver, porque os levantáis corriendo antes de permitir que la gran calma os entregue sus dones? Permíteme que os recuerde que esta es una historia de dormir, diseñada para relajar vuestra vigilancia consciente y abrir ese canal hacia Aetelburg. Dejad que el sonido de mi voz os guíe a través de las calles empedradas, ahora bañadas por la luz indirecta de una luna que parece saberlo todo. Aetelburg también tenía sus rituales para garantizar que el silencio no fuera estéril, sino fértil. No se trataba solo de dejar de trabajar, se trataba de preparar la ciudad para que el orden pudiera actuar. Uno de estos rituales era la limpieza del pesar. Antes de las 3 campanadas, nadie podía irse a dormir con una preocupación activa. Si Ulrico estaba enfadado por un mal negocio, debía sentarse con su esposa y hablar sobre el enfado, pero no sobre la solución. Debía liberar la emoción y depositar el problema, como una ofrenda, en la oscuridad. El anciano Morian explicaba que el sueño no era un basurero. Si llenaba su mente con los restos emocionales no digeridos del día, el subconsciente se pasaría toda la noche limpiando el desorden en lugar de construir fortuna. La prosperidad, decía Morian, con voz suave como el musgo, no puede construirse sobre una cama de resentimiento o ansiedad. El sueño es el tiempo para la edificación, no para la demolición de fantasmas. Esta es una lección crucial para nosotros hoy. La preocupación es, en esencia, un trabajo mental improductivo. Es la mente consciente girando en círculos sin salida. Cuando os preparáis para dormir, ¿estáis limpiando vuestra ciudad emocional? ¿O, por el contrario, estáis dejando activado el modo alarma de vuestra mente, impidiendo que el trabajo silencioso de reorganización comience? Os invito a hacer una pausa ahora, mentalmente, y a considerar si hay algo que podáis depositar suavemente en la noche. No para resolverlo, sino simplemente para entregarlo al orden. Permitid que vuestra respiración se haga más lenta, más profunda, como si estuvierais sellando el almacén de vuestro subconsciente, sabiendo que, a salvo en la oscuridad, la solución ya está siendo tejida. A medida que Aetelburg entraba en el corazón de la noche, se producía otro fenómeno interesante que los viajeros nunca entendían: la distribución silenciosa. Aetelburg nunca tuvo una gran diferencia de riqueza entre sus ciudadanos. Los comerciantes podían ser más ricos que los tejedores, pero todos vivían con una abundancia cómoda. Esto se debía a que la gran calma afectaba a todos por igual, pero la entrega de la prosperidad era caprichosa y justa. El mercader rico podía despertar y descubrir que, si bien su pila de plata era un poco más alta, lo que realmente había aumentado era el conocimiento de un nuevo puerto comercial que le permitiría diversificar. El tejedor humilde, por otro lado, quizás encontraba un pequeño saco de monedas extra entre las herramientas. Los ancianos explicaban que la fortuna nocturna se distribuía según la necesidad de crecimiento de cada individuo. Al rico le daba el conocimiento para expandir su universo, y al pobre le daba el sustento para liberarse de la urgencia. La prosperidad de Aetelburg se autorregulaba en el silencio. Nadie acaparaba la suerte, porque la suerte era un producto del reposo, y el reposo era obligatorio para todos. Esto nos lleva a una verdad profunda sobre la abundancia personal. La verdadera riqueza es la que equilibra el interior y el exterior. ¿De qué sirve tener un gran banco si vuestra mente está agotada y carece de la intuición para utilizar esa riqueza sabiamente? Aetelburg nos enseña que la mente es la verdadera reserva de capital. Si os gusta esta idea de la autorregulación nocturna de la fortuna, contadme en los comentarios qué pensáis sobre el concepto de que la riqueza se distribuye según la necesidad de crecimiento y no la capacidad de esfuerzo. Fomentemos esa comunidad de reflexión, incluso mientras nos dirigimos al sueño. Continuamos nuestro paseo. Ahora estamos en las afueras de la ciudad, donde la piedra de la muralla se encuentra con el campo. Aquí, el guardián de la noche, un hombre llamado Joram, vigilaba no contra los ladrones, pues nadie se atrevía a desafiar la gran calma, sino contra el ruido. Joram no era un militar, era un filósofo silencioso. Su trabajo era asegurarse de que el silencio se mantuviera puro. Si oía un llanto prolongado o el sonido de una disputa, se acercaba suavemente y recordaba a los infractores el propósito de la noche. El ruido, decía Joram, es la resistencia a la reorganización. Es como arrojar arena a los engranajes cósmicos. Detiene el trabajo sutil que se hace en la oscuridad. A menudo, la gente se resistía a este silencio. Temían que el reposo total significara la pérdida de control. Ulrico, el mercader de tapices, a veces tenía sueños de ansiedad, soñando que un competidor estaba trabajando en secreto, que su almacén estaba vacío. Pero cada mañana, su prosperidad demostraba que sus miedos eran infundados. El miedo al reposo es quizás nuestro mayor obstáculo para la prosperidad, incluso hoy. Tememos que si no estamos conectados o haciendo, nos quedaremos atrás. Joram, el guardián de Aetelburg, nos sonreiría suavemente y nos diría: lo que realmente teméis es la confrontación con vosotros mismos en el silencio, no la pérdida de oportunidad. Porque el silencio de la noche en Aetelburg obligaba a la introspección. Las familias hablaban, leían y se conocían sin las distracciones del comercio. Esta conexión interna y social era, de hecho, otro aspecto de la prosperidad. Una ciudad donde la gente se siente vista y comprendida es una ciudad rica en capital social. Y el capital social es la red invisible sobre la que la prosperidad económica puede florecer con seguridad. Ahora, mientras la noche alcanza su cenit, es el momento en que Aetelburg se vuelve más misteriosa. Es la hora del flujo de plata. Según la tradición, en la mitad de la noche, cuando el silencio era tan profundo que se sentía físico, el espíritu de la ciudad, al que llamaban Aeteria, visitaba las plazas. No dejaba oro en el suelo, sino que reordenaba las prioridades de los ciudadanos. A la mañana siguiente, el comerciante Ulrico podía sentir una repentina, inexplicable aversión por los tapices rojos que le habían dado tantos problemas el día anterior, y en su lugar le parecía urgente concentrarse en las sedas azules. Esta reorientación, este cambio de enfoque subconsciente, era el verdadero regalo de la noche. Era una limpieza de las malas ideas del día y una infusión de mejores ideas organizadas por la intuición. El flujo de plata no se trataba de encontrar dinero, Se trataba de encontrar el camino de menor resistencia hacia el dinero. Imaginad esto aplicado a vuestra vida. Estáis atrapados en un proyecto o en una relación que os consume. Habéis trabajado conscientemente, tratando de forzar un resultado. Os rendís al sueño, a la gran calma. Y a medianoche, el flujo de plata reorganiza vuestras conexiones mentales. Os despertáis con la certeza de que el camino no es la confrontación, sino la retirada elegante, o la certeza de que el cliente difícil no es el que debéis perseguir, sino el que ni siquiera habíais considerado. Esa es la riqueza de Aethelburg, la capacidad de recalibrar la estrategia sin esfuerzo consciente. Aethelburg era, por encima de todo, una lección sobre el tiempo. Los ciudadanos de Aethelburg no estaban obsesionados con la velocidad. Entendían que algunos procesos, la digestión de una idea, la maduración de una oportunidad, requieren el lento, metódico trabajo de la sombra. En nuestra cultura de gratificación instantánea, hemos olvidado el poder del tiempo. Queremos sembrar y cosechar el mismo día, pero la prosperidad, como un árbol, necesita raíces profundas, y las raíces crecen mejor en la oscuridad. Cuando os sentáis abramados o impacientes, recordad el ritmo tranquilo de Ethelburg. Dejad que la idea repose, que la solución se asiente. Permitid que el silencio trabaje por vosotros. A medida que el alba se acerca, vamos a acercarnos a la parte final de esta historia de dormir. El momento en que la gran calma se disuelve y se revela la prosperidad nocturna. A las 6 de la mañana, la torre del reloj emitía 3 campanadas brillantes y claras. Era el sonido del despertar, y más importante, el sonido de la aceptación. Los ciudadanos de Aethelburg no salían corriendo. Se levantaban despacio, se vestían y se preparaban para recibir el día. Ulrico, el mercader, se acercaba a su almacén. Retiraba el paño que cubría sus tapices, y al hacerlo, realizaba una observación metódica. No miraba la cantidad, sino la disposición. ¿Qué colores le llamaban la atención hoy? ¿Qué patrón parecía haber cobrado nueva vida? Una mañana, Ulrico notó que un rollo de seda gris, que había considerado un error de compra, ahora le parecía la elección perfecta para forrar los carros de los viajeros ricos que se dirigían al norte, donde el clima era más frío. No había pensado en ese uso el día anterior. La idea había sido organizada y presentada por el orden nocturno. En esa mañana, Ulrico se hizo más rico, no por haber adquirido más seda, sino por haber adquirido el conocimiento de cómo maximizar el valor de lo que ya poseía. Esta es la conclusión fundamental de Aethelburg. La ciudad se hacía rica porque la riqueza no se medía en unidades de oro, sino en unidades de claridad. El reposo nocturno limpiaba la mente de la niebla de la urgencia, permitiendo a los ciudadanos ver oportunidades que habían estado invisibles a plena luz del día. El secreto de Aethelburg no era un hechizo, sino una práctica profunda de la inteligencia subconsciente. Entendieron que el verdadero trabajo de la prosperidad no es la producción, sino la conexión y la organización. Y ahora, la lección final, la que os conecta directamente con vuestra propia vida. Vosotros sois Aethelburg. Vuestra mente es esa ciudad antigua, capaz de generar abundancia mientras el cuerpo descansa. Cada vez que os acostáis con la intención de entregar vuestros problemas al reposo, estáis aplicando la gran calma. Vuestras horas de sueño son el momento en que vuestro subconsciente trabaja como el orden de la ciudad, reajustando vuestras prioridades, tejiendo nuevas conexiones neuronales y preparando el flujo de plata para el amanecer. Pero, al igual que los ciudadanos debían limpiar su pesar y silenciar su ruido, nosotros debemos aprender a hacer lo mismo. Debemos honrar el reposo no como una necesidad perezosa, sino como una herramienta activa de nuestra prosperidad. Preguntaos, mientras os acercáis a los límites del sueño, ¿estoy permitiendo que mi ciudad interior se enriquezca esta noche? ¿He liberado mi mente de la preocupación, permitiendo que la organización silenciosa se apodere de ella? Si os habéis sentido identificados con Ulrico o con Lira, con el agricultor Cael o el guardián Joram, recordad que el camino hacia la fortuna no siempre se traza en línea recta y bajo el sol. A veces, el camino más rápido es a través del silencio, a través de la rendición, a través de la noche. Así, terminamos nuestro viaje a Aethelburg. Que esta noche, el misterio de la ciudad que prosperaba mientras dormía os acompañe. Que os dé permiso para soltar las riendas, para confiar en que, al igual que los comerciantes de la seda y el oro, vuestra fortuna, vuestra claridad y vuestras soluciones se están multiplicando en la oscuridad. Dejad que vuestros cuerpos se relajen aún más profundamente en vuestro lecho. Sentid el peso de la gravedad, la suavidad de las sábanas. La ciudad de Ethelburg está cerrando sus puertas por la noche. Escuchad las 3 campanadas lentas y profundas, el sonido de la gran calma. El trabajo ha terminado. Ahora, que el orden trabaje. Deseamos que tengáis un descanso profundo, reparador y, sobre todo, enriquecedor. Buenas noches. Now, having explored the individual experience of finding nocturnal prosperity, we turn our gaze toward the city's collective wisdom. The administration of Ethelburg operated on a principle utterly alien to modern leadership: strategic absence. The city magistrate, Lord Vestas, was famous not for the decrees he issued, but for the decisions he deliberately refused to make before the dawn. Consider the predicament of Phelan and Torin, 2 influential landowners embroiled in a bitter dispute over a narrow, fertile stream that bordered their properties. Days of aggressive negotiation had collapsed into acrimonious stalemate. Lawyers were hired, tempers were frayed, and the conflict threatened to paralyze the grain market. Lord Vestas listened patiently to their accusations until the 3rd chime of the evening sounded. Then, he simply declared a temporal suspension. All documents were sealed in an outer chamber. The lawyers were sent home, and the disputants were mandated to spend the night focusing on anything except the contested stream. The crucial observation here is that the magistrate did not search for an answer. He created conditions for the answer to emerge. When Phelan and Torin returned the next morning, they found no new edicts. Instead, as they stood reviewing the sealed documents, Torin casually mentioned a minor irrigation canal he'd contemplated building years ago, a project entirely unrelated to the dispute. Phelan, now free from the mental friction of conflict, realized that Torin's old canal route, if slightly extended, would solve the access problem for both fields instantly, bypassing the contested stream entirely. The solution, an elegant synthesis of old ideas, had crystallized only after the active, pressurized effort of confrontation had been withdrawn. This demonstrated Ethelburg's governance secret. Genuine progress often resides in a quiet convergence of disparate thoughts, not in a loud clash of opposing wills. Building on this structural quietude, observe the city's physical form itself. Ethelburg possessed no grand central forum for shouting debates. Instead, the entire community gravitated toward the well of deliberation, not a place of meetings, but a simple, open courtyard paved with ancient, slightly concave stones known for their cooling properties. Inhabitants understood that every stone and every pathway in the city acted as a passive conductor. They believed that when the human noise ceased, the stones absorbed the residual anxieties of the day, filtering and releasing only the pure informational essence back into the night air. Consequently, another crucial layer of Ethelburg's prosperity was the unseen process of knowledge maturation. Every contract drafted, every new idea shared, every scientific observation recorded, was considered incomplete until it had rested through the silence. This was far deeper than simple reflection. It was a belief that the unconscious mind, unburdened by language, cross-referenced the new information against the entire accumulated wisdom of the individual. Think about how this applies when you face a challenging new skill or complex code. You may struggle fruitlessly for hours, only to wake with the syntax suddenly clear. Ethelburg institutionalized this phenomenon. Merchants would finalize tentative partnership agreements just before the common hour, understanding that the true efficacy and potential risk to the alliance would be revealed not through further negotiation, but through the filtering mechanism of the intervening night. The resting mind performed rapid, deep scenario planning, a computational feat impossible under the stress of conscious deadlines. This silent, subterranean processing gifted the city a remarkable strategic foresight, transforming raw data into refined, actionable wisdom simply through patience. The city's wealth was fundamentally rooted in its superior time management of the intellect. The prosperity of Ethelburg was fundamentally secured by an unwavering trust, forged paradoxically during the hours of absolute inactivity. Consider the esteemed Scribe Guild, which oversaw all civic and commercial transactions. Unlike other cities where ledgers were often suspiciously revised under cover darkness, Ethelburg enforced the ceremony of the sealed balance. Every evening, master scribes used molten wax and the official municipal stamp to seal the final day's accounts. This action, witnessed by both the trade representative and the city guard, guaranteed that no calculation could be manipulated until the wax was officially broken at dawn. Consequently, every citizen woke with the absolute certainty that the foundation of their commerce was sound and immutable. This certainty, this freedom from needing to audit one's neighbor, was a powerful, intangible asset worth more than all the city's silver combined. Moving beyond mere operational honesty, Ethelberg cultivated a unique form of commercial foresight born entirely from the subconscious landscape. Now, direct your attention to Eris, a peculiar silk merchant. Eris never read market reports. His inventory decisions were dictated solely by what he termed the resonance of the dream tide. If, during the deep repose, he experienced vivid, emotionally neutral dreams involving specific color combinations or certain numerical sequences, he interpreted those patterns as forecasts for future demand. For instance, a persistent vision of shimmering crimson meant a high demand for rare dyes 3 months hence, regardless of the current sluggish sales. Furthermore, he meticulously documented not the literal imagery, but the underlying emotional pull of the vision upon awakening, trusting this primal sensation over any conscious calculation. Eris was essentially monetizing a form of deep, predictive intuition, proving that the most valuable commodity was accurate future information, freely granted by the resting mind. This reliance on nocturnal insight profoundly shifted the city's economic rhythm. The obligatory interval of waiting, this enforced break between desire and acquisition, inadvertently inflated the value of the goods themselves, a phenomenon traders refer to as the premium of patience. Think about how a coveted item gains mythological status when it is physically unattainable for 12 hours. The anticipation allowed the buyer's desire to mature and deepen, transforming a simple want into a compelling need. The goods themselves gained a certain luster, a mythical quality, simply by virtue of having rested under the silent vigil of the night. Building on this, the city understood that scarcity, managed through time, was a greater value generator than mere volume. They were, in essence, selling not the product, but the exquisite feeling of finally obtaining a product that had been carefully guarded by the darkness. Conversely, consider how the Ethelbergian artisans approach creation. The potter, Ilera, would often leave her half-finished vase not because she was tired, but because the clay itself needed to be consulted. She believed the clay possessed an informational memory of the final form, a memory only accessible when the conscious heat of her shaping hands was removed. The night allowed the clay's latent geometry to surface. Upon resuming her work, she often found an adjustment, a subtle curve, a minor shift in weight distribution that elevated the piece from competent craftsmanship to true artistry. Consequently, the silence served as a final, critical step in the creative process, transforming mere effort into inherent worth. Now, consider how this applies when you face a personal decision where immediate action feels mandatory. If you continuously pressure a situation, a creative block, a financial venture, you are diminishing its premium of patience. You are cheapening the outcome by refusing to let anticipation build, both in yourself and in those who await your results. The silence of your own Ethelberg is not merely recovery time. It is a vital period when your internal market recalibrates, generating not just an answer, but the optimal outcome clothed in the desired anticipation. The challenge, therefore, lies not in working harder, but in cultivating the sovereign self-control required to stop and trust the night's architecture. This is a profound and often overlooked discipline, and one that separates mere busyness from genuine, effortless wealth creation. The profound peace enjoyed by Ethelberg was not merely the absence of commerce. It was the active, communal suppression of risk through faith in a nocturnal process. Citizens understood that worry was a contagion, capable of disrupting the subtle work of reorganization. Consequently, they developed mechanisms to externalize their collective anxieties. The foremost among these was a Vigilantia arbor, a colossal, hollowed-out oak standing sentinel near the city gates. Just prior to the hour of repose, any citizen burdened by acute financial fear, a fear of crop failure, or apprehension about unforeseen catastrophe, would approach the tree. They would not speak their fear aloud, but would instead drop a small, symbolic stone into the tree's dark heart. This ritual, known as depositing the shadow, was essential. Building upon this unique practice, the function of the night watchers emerged. These individuals, unlike typical guards, were chosen not for strength, but for their acute emotional sensitivity. They were, in effect, human barometers. Their duty was simply to sit near the Vigilantia Arbor for the first 3 hours of the Great Calm. They were instructed to note the sound of the stones settling within the oak's core. A light, infrequent settling sound indicated minimal community stress, signaling a night ripe for maximal intellectual gains. A heavy, frequent cascade suggested widespread, unmitigated panic, requiring the city elders to perform a renewal of trust ceremony at dawn. This system allowed the citizens to literally put their fears aside, trusting the watchers to manage the communal emotional weight, thus freeing their own minds for productive rest. Another crucial layer reinforcing Ethelberg's nocturnal success lay within the very structure at homes, often called whisper chambers. These dwellings were constructed with a specific acoustic consideration. The walls were thickest at the foundation, narrowing slightly toward the roofline, a design intended to minimize external street noise while subtly amplifying the interior sounds of deep, rhythmic breathing. Furthermore, the ventilation systems were engineered to create a consistent, low-frequency hum throughout the sleeping quarters, a steady, hypnotic drone meant to encourage the brain into the theta wave states associated with creative breakthroughs and memory consolidation. It was within these meticulously tuned environments that true spontaneous innovation occurred. Consider the case of Cressa, an inventor obsessed with developing a more efficient loom shuttle. She would spend her days sketching complex, interlocking mechanisms, often ending her day frustrated. Yet, because of the chamber's acoustical support, she frequently woke with the exact spatial coordinates of the solution, a geometric insight often arriving as a distinct echo in her mind, completely detached from the labor of her conscious effort. The city provided the optimal physical infrastructure to ensure that mental energy spent during the day was perfectly synthesized and refined at night. This leads us to a fascinating reflection. If the architecture of Ethelberg was specifically designed to maximize subconscious yield, what are the subtle, environmental disturbances in your own life, the noise, the light, the unchecked anxieties that are inhibiting the silent wealth being created within your personal whisper chamber? As you prepare to settle deeper into your rest, ask yourself, what symbolic shadows do I need to deposit outside my mental gates tonight, allowing my inner watcher to confirm that the environment is clear for true restorative and prosperous reorganization? The greatest wealth, after all, is the unhindered flow of fresh insight. The peculiar prosperity of Ethelberg was, understandably, a source of intense fascination and deep frustration for its closest rivals. The thriving, round-the-clock trading hub of Iridia, perched on the coast, simply could not reconcile Ethelberg's quiet abundance with its strict 12-hour moratorium on commerce. Viridian merchants, driven by a philosophy of perpetual motion, believed the Ethelbergians were practicing some form of market subterfuge, perhaps hiding a vein of silver or operating clandestine workshops deep beneath the earth. Consequently, Viridia dispatched Jaren, a shrewd but impatient operative, tasked with uncovering the city's hidden economic engine. Jaren secreted himself within Ethelberg just before the Great Calm descended, fully expecting to discover the secret machinery of well production operating under guise of rest. He spent the midnight hours, the supposed peak of Ethelberg's enrichment, peering through the gaps and shutters, listening intently at silent alleyways. He heard nothing but the measured breathing of a deeply sleeping town and the soft rustle of leaves. No clinking coins, no hammers, no whispers of secret deals. The profound, almost tangible stillness, devoid of any actionable intelligence, did not reassure Jaren. It began to erode his very sanity. He realized, with a chilling dread, that the secret was not what they were doing in the dark, but how deeply they were committed to doing nothing at all. He returned to Viridia empty-handed, unable to report anything more than perfect, unnerving quiet. Furthermore, this unwavering commitment to mental space permeated the city's pedagogical methods. Children in Ethelberg were educated not in rote memorization or frantic competition, but through the curriculum of calm, a rigorous training designed to harness the power of nocturnal processing. For instance, geometry lessons often involve complex spatial relationships. Students were specifically taught to approach the problem, establish the parameters, and then, before frustration set in, to perform a deliberate act of mental detachment before the hour of repose. Building upon this educational foundation, morning assessments focused not on the speed of the answer, but on the symmetry of insight, a solution that involved numerous convoluted steps, suggesting excessive mental forcing during the previous day, was graded lower than a solution that presented a single, elegant step, the hallmark an idea delivered whole and clean by the resting mind. The teachers emphasized that true brilliance was frictionless, suggesting the body's rest allowed the mental architecture to discard noise and reveal the inherent structural logic of the universe. Moreover, the citizens developed a highly refined, internal metric for sustained success, the concept of kinetic reserves. They understood that physical output, the actual labor of trade or craft, drew from a finite daily storehouse of potential energy. However, the rest period was viewed as energy banking. The deeper and more focused the repose, the greater the deposit of kinetic reserves for the coming day. Citizens monitored their own depth of rest, a subjective feeling of renewal far more nuanced than simple tiredness. If an individual felt their kinetic reserves were low, even if a highly profitable opportunity presented itself, they were culturally obligated to decline it, understanding that engaging in complex or high-stakes action with depleted reserves inevitably led to critical errors. Their greatest sustainable wealth was, therefore, not measured by the gold they acquired, but by the profound quality of mental energy they possessed, ensuring that all actions taken were executed with optimal precision and clarity. This self-imposed speed limit, derived entirely from nocturnal trust, guaranteed the longevity of Ethelberg's singular prosperity. The prosperity of Ethelberg manifested not only in material wealth and superior strategy, but also a unique meteorological phenomenon observed by the few official chroniclers permitted to study the city. Specifically, they noted the halo effect, a subtle, persistent luminescence that seemed to hover just above the city walls every evening, intensifying during the hours of the Great Calm. While rationalists dismissed it as atmospheric refraction, the Ethelbergians maintained that this light was a visual manifestation of highly refined, synthesized thought energy being released into collective field. This belief led to a distinct architectural feature, the construction of reflective pools, known as luminaries of thought, situated on the highest rooftops. These weren't mere decorative ponds. They were designed to capture and amplify the halo effect, feeding this perceived psychic energy back into the sleeping city, ensuring the next day was infused with heightened focus and benevolent outcomes. Building on this energy conservation, consider the city's approach to currency itself. Ethelberg utilized two forms of exchange, the standard silver coin for external trade and an internal, non-transferable token known as a quiet coin. These tokens were earned not through labor, but through demonstrated mastery of deep, uninterrupted rest, verified by voluntary physiological monitoring conducted by the Scribe Guild. For instance, achieving 3 consecutive nights of rest periods with 0 recorded cortisol spikes earned a citizen a quiet coin. These tokens could only be exchanged for goods or services that promoted further tranquility, such as premium insulation materials for homes, specialized sound dampening textiles, or access to the elders' reflective gardens. This sophisticated system fundamentally valued internal well-being as the ultimate economic good, creating a virtuous loop where rest was both the cause and the reward of prosperity. Conversely, the concept of debt was utterly transformed. Ethelberg had no usures or interest rates. Instead, if a citizen incurred a financial obligation, it was not settled through immediate payment, but through a formalized pledge of mental focus. The debtor agreed to dedicate a specific, structured portion of their waking day, usually the hour immediately preceding the Great Calm, to intense, quiet visualization of the successful completion of their obligation. This exercise was intended to leverage the debtor's mental clarity, generated during the night, to accelerate the practical solution rather than compounding the initial stress. The focus was not on extracting punitive repayment, but on harnessing the debtor's focus and tension to manifest a means of their own success, transforming potential failure into a catalyst for profound self-discipline. Now, consider how this philosophy impacted interpersonal relationships within the community. The citizens of Ethelberg engaged in reciprocal trust trading. If merchant Eos was waiting on a critical shipment, he would not bombard the sender with anxious messages. Instead, He would use his pre-sleep hour to send a deliberate, non-verbal message of trust and confidence toward the traveling party. His counterpart, knowing the Ethelbergian tradition, would feel an inexplicable surge of calm and efficiency upon awakening, often leading to the timely resolution of logistical snags. This practice underscored the belief that focused mental intention, when projected into the silent void, had tangible, positive influence on external events, transforming passive rest into active, benevolent collaboration. Furthermore, Ethelbert employed a unique disaster preparedness strategy centered entirely on mental composure. When a legitimate threat arose, such as a potential river flood or a severe drought, the city did not immediately mobilize in frantic defense. Instead, the elders initiated the collective stillness protocol. All non-essential activity was immediately halted, and citizens were required to spend 2 hours in silent contemplation, focusing only on the absence of the disaster and the presence of systemic stability. The belief was that unified, massive mental calmness could subtly shift the probability of the adverse event, minimizing its impact through sheer mental coherence. This sophisticated faith in the power of collective mental hygiene ensured that when action finally was required, it was precise, coordinated, and devoid of the costly errors born of panic. Beyond the mechanics of personal wealth, Ethelbert maintained its stability by treating its entire recorded history as a living text, subject to nocturnal revision. This monumental undertaking resided within the archives of deferred wisdom, a structure built not for immediate consultation, but for silent, passive processing. The city's official historians, known as the Keepers of the Annals, held the peculiar responsibility of meticulously indexing every civic failure, every diplomatic misstep, and every past economic depression, then covering these vulnerable documents with thick, light-proof linen before the evening chimes. Consequently, the city understood that mistakes, once recorded and respectfully shielded, were no longer static data points of regret, but rather raw material for future success. The belief held that during the Great Calm, the collective subminds of citizens would traverse these archives, automatically filtering out the emotional charge associated with past errors and extracting only the crystalline operational truths. Waking up in Ethelberg often meant not just solving the day's immediate problem, but gaining an inexplicable immunity to the systemic failures of the prior century. This constant, unconscious historical audit was perhaps their deepest form of long-term economic insurance. Moreover, the city utilized a unique shared resource system built entirely on trust and nocturnal clarity, the concept of the cistern of shared intuition. This massive reservoir, which supplied water to the entire populace, had no meters or locks. If the water level dropped critically, the solution was never found in rationing or public shaming. Instead, every citizen was required to spend their initial rest hour visualizing precise location and structure of an unutilized underground spring or fissure near the city limits. This focused, synchronized mental search, a form of deep earth scrying, was highly effective. It was said that the synchronized quietude of the populace resonated with the natural frequencies of the earth, often leading one specific individual, upon waking, to walk directly to a location where the water source could be easily tapped, benefiting all. In sharp contrast to their secluded internal workings, Ethelberg often served as an unacknowledged arbiter for external conflicts, specifically those involving complex interstate treaties where logic had failed. Consider the arrival of a high dignitary from the Eastern Marches, a diplomat named Kalen, whose mission was to break a paralyzing stalemate over fishing rights between two powerful coastal kingdoms. Kalen did not request meetings or strategic counsel from Lord Vestas. He merely requested permission to reside within the city's walls, observing the Great Calm for 5 consecutive nights. Kalen understood that Ethelbert did not offer advice. It offered the perfect mental climate for self-resolution. He spent his days absorbing the intricate details of the treaty deadlock, then surrendered the data to the night. By the third dawn, Kalen experienced a powerful, silent realization. The entire conflict was built upon a false binary, neglecting a third, neutral zone previously deemed worthless. This third way, delivered to him in his deepest sleep, offered resolution that honored both party sovereignty. Consequently, Ethelberg indirectly brokered peace, not through intervention, but through the export of pure, unadulterated clarity. Now, consider how this profound moral sentiment applied to individual action. prior to the Great Calm, every citizen undertook an internal audit, a quick, rigorous check of the day's ethical integrity. This was not a confession of sin, but an honest calibration of their personal moral compass. If they had performed a dishonest act, they did not attempt to fix it, but rather resolved to spend their rest visualizing the perfectly executed, ethically superior version of that action. They believed the mind, while resting, would restructure the neural pathways, making the virtuous choice the path of least resistance the following day. This deliberate nocturnal moral engineering ensured that Ethelberg's financial wealth was perpetually underpinned by an unshakable ethical foundation, cementing a sustainable prosperity impossible in cities fueled by unchecked greed. The enduring viability of Ethelberg's singular economy hinged critically upon an art few outside its walls ever recognized: the deliberate engineering of the sonic transition. The three profound strokes marking the hour of repose were not mere signals. They were carefully calibrated sonic events. The city employed a dedicated specialist, the ringer Elmsworth, whose sole lifelong occupation was maintaining the resonant purity of the immense bronze bell housed in the central tower. Elmsworth ensured the third chime carried a distinct, descending frequency, a pitch scientifically proven, by Ethelbergian standards, to minimize residual delta wave activity in the conscious mind, effectively smoothing the neurological transition into restorative slumber. Consequently, the ensuing silence was not a passive lack of noise, but an active field of low-frequency sound absorption, deliberately enhanced by the moss-covered paving stones and the specialized density of the roofing tiles. This created what the citizens termed the acoustic quarantine, ensuring that the delicate internal work of connection and synthesis could proceed unmolested by external interference. No other city understood that prosperity first required the perfect capture and buffering of sound energy. Furthermore, the city's unique economic health was tracked by an unconventional metric wholly divorced from quarterly ledgers: the chronometry of calm. This was not a measurement of time elapsed, but a measure of the quality of the stillness. Deep beneath the ringer's tower, shielded from all vibration, lay a series of highly sensitive brass resonators, tuned to measure minute shifts in ambient atmospheric pressure and seismic stability, indices that the elders believed directly correlated to the city's collective mental harmony. When the resonators indicated a high calm score, signify a night of deep, unified repose, the city's governing council would immediately authorize investment in high-risk, high-reward ventures the following day. They reasoned that the collective clarity guaranteed minimal errors and maximal intuitive success. Conversely, a low calm score, often associated with subtle, undetectable microvibrations, indicated underlying civic stress. In such cases, all major economic decisions were postponed and resources were diverted into non-monetary, community-centric projects like the restoration of public gardens or the distribution of specialized herbal tinctures to promote psychological resilience. Now, consider how this rigorous self-monitoring applied when Ethelberg faced the prospect of integrating new technology. When the concept of a water-powered grain mill was first introduced, a machine that would introduce constant, low-level rotational noise, the city did not immediately embrace its efficiency. Instead, they required a period of simulated rest. Engineers spent 3 weeks operating the mill during the day, while Elmsworth and the resonator keepers analyzed the subsequent nighttime calm scores. It was discovered that the subtle, grinding hum permanently degraded the chronometry metrics. The mill was ultimately rejected, despite its undeniable economic efficiency, because the community calculated that the loss of nocturnal clarity, the silent source of their actual wealth, outweighed any gain in production volume. The citizens maintained that the greatest currency they possessed was their undivided attention, and anything that diminished the quality of their internal landscape was, by definition, a net financial loss. This profound deference to internal metrics over external output solidified their unique path. They prioritized mental capital above physical commodities, ensuring that the roots of their abundance remained perpetually undisturbed by the clamor of superficial progress. Reflecting on this journey so far, gazing back at the silent, moonlit rooftops of Ethelberg, we confront a powerful reversal of conventional wisdom. We have observed a civilization that deliberately traded frantic effort for profound quietude, successfully challenging the very bedrock assumptions of growth and prosperity. The accumulated observations, from meticulous management of collective anxiety to the prioritizing of subtle sonic environments, reveal not random practices, but the interconnected mechanics of a deeply sophisticated, counterintuitive machine. The ultimate implication woven through these ancient practices is a profound realization that the most fertile ground for exponential return is not the marketplace floor, but the fallow period of the human mind. Prosperity, in the Ethelberger model, is not something you seize. It is something you attract by clearing the debris of conscious striving. The financial stability, the clear-sighted strategic choices, and the effortless ethical coherence all stem from a single, disciplined act: the sovereign surrender of control to the deeper, more powerful currents of awareness. Imagine the human intellect not as a locomotive straining on the tracks, demanding fuel and constant guidance, but as an immense, complex geological structure. During the day, we stand on the surface, scratching at the rock face, engaging in the necessary friction of labor. But it is only when the surface temperature drops, when the external pressure is removed, that the deeper tectonic forces, the slow, immense shifts in priority and intuition, can realign the structure from within. The resulting wealth is merely the external measurement of that internal, structural coherence. The city's genius lay in its collective recognition that the subterranean work, the clearing of regret, the synthesis of data, the refining of intention, was a critical path to abundance. We find ourselves at a threshold, recognizing that the noise we often embrace as a sign of importance or dedication is actually a form of informational decay, eroding the very capital we seek to accumulate. The enforced silence of the Great Calm was designed precisely to halt this decay, creating a vacuum into which the purest, most efficient ideas could be drawn. This process transformed uncertainty, the greatest impediment to wealth, into immutable certainty, simply by allowing the mind to perform its own quality assurance checks away from the distorting glare of immediate performance pressure. The profound security the populace enjoyed was therefore never dependent on physical defense or crude silver, but on an observed, unshakable immutability. They trusted that the system, their communal and individual subconscious, would work on their behalf, optimizing every resource and rectifying every misalignment while they rested. This trust became their strongest currency, translating into superior foresight and unforced action. As the final echoes of the city's profound quiet settle around us now, let us prepare to absorb the ultimate, personal meaning of this legendary architecture. The question remains, how we translate this external model of serene success into the immediate, personal geography of our own lives. We have navigated the blueprints of this hidden prosperity. Now, we must internalize a final lesson this profound quietude holds for your own awakening. The profound quietude that finally envelopes Ethelberg is not merely the end of a long day's activity. It is a deliberate beginning of the most important creative cycle. As we drift away from its moon-drenched cobblestones, having absorbed the principles of the Great Calm, the true brilliance of this lost civilization comes into sharp focus. Ethelberg was, in essence, a masterpiece of self-governance, built not on external might or competitive fervor, but on the disciplined reverence for the inner life. They understood that all external abundance is merely the shadow cast by internal clarity. The central, unifying secret of Ethelberg, which transcends a simple accumulation of gold or silver, is the radical notion of fallow time as fortune. We have been conditioned to believe that life and success are matters of constant input. More effort, more data, more pressure. Ethelberg proves that the saturation point is often a precise moment when true progress ceases. Their wealth accumulated because they systematically created a cognitive vacuum, an informational void which nature and the human subconscious abhors. In that space of deep rest, the mind does not simply recover. It performs an instantaneous, high-level reorganization of the self. Think of the night not as a deficit of activity, but as a period of profound computational labor. While your conscious ego sleeps, your internal Ethelberg is busy conducting the chronometry of calm, filtering anxieties into inert shadows, restructuring flawed strategies into elegant solutions, and reallocating your mental resources based on maximum intuitive yield. The morning prophet, the breakthrough idea, the sudden realization of the third way, the effortless ethical choice, is simply the residual value of the subterranean, frictionless work. This implies a complete reframing of productivity. True success, Sustainable prosperity demands not that you work harder, but that you become an impeccable curator of your rest. It requires the courage to seal your own balance sheets, your worries, your half-formed ideas, your emotional grievances, and consciously entrust them to the night. It demands the discipline of the ringer Elmsworth, ensuring that your personal acoustic quarantine is honored, protecting the delicate resonance needed for deep insight. Therefore, as you settle into the sanctity of your own rest, remember the ultimate lesson of Ethelberg. Your greatest and most reliable source of wealth is the knowledge that is generated without your interference. The city's enduring prosperity was secured when its citizens stopped looking outside their walls for solutions and started trusting the quiet, architectural wisdom forming within. This is a true legacy of the city that grew rich while it slept. It grants you the profound permission to step away from the tyranny of constant vigilance, to halt the relentless pursuit of action, and to recognize that your most powerful moves are often made not by your hands, but by your mind when it is finally, beautifully at peace. Allow the final, deep resonance of this story to become the silent mandate of your own life. Surrender to the darkness, trust the reorganization, and wake up richer. Sweet dreams.